I never imagined that humiliation could have a sound, a sharp splitting crack that echoed through the grand hall of my own wedding like a warning I refused to hear. It wasn't the orchestra or the clinking champagne flutes or the whispers curling around the marble pillars. It was my father's old shoes. The quiet, apologetic scrape of worn leather against polished floors as 300 guests turned to stare at him. That sound sliced straight through my ribcage. And in that moment, standing in a shimmering gown beneath a chandelier dripping with gold, I realized something chilling. I wasn't marrying into a family. I was marrying into a hierarchy that had already decided exactly what I was worth and what my father was not. I didn't know it then, but this was the night my entire life would split open, the night I would lose a fiancé, a future, and the illusions I'd clung to for years. And it was also the night my father would look at me with gentle, trembling eyes and reveal a truth so impossible, so life-shattering, it would rewrite everything I ever thought I knew about him. And about myself. I saw him the moment he stepped through the side entrance, my father Henry Ford, 63 years old, wearing the same navy suit he had patched twice this year. It hung a bit loose on his narrow shoulders, the product of long days, and skipped meals he always pretended weren't skipped at all. He held his hat between his hands, turning it slowly, nervously, like he hoped no one would notice him slipping into the back of the ballroom. But of course they noticed. Every glittering head swiveled, every whisper sharpened. I felt the air shift thick with judgment. My fingers tightened around my bouquet. My throat closed. Dad looked so small beneath the towering gold archways. So humble among the ice sculptures, the crystal candelabras, the imported orchids flown in from Colombia just for tonight. But when our eyes met, oh God, he smiled. A soft, tentative smile that said he was proud, that he was here for me, that none of this mattered as long as I was happy. I wanted to run to him, to pull him into the front row where he belonged, to tell him he was the best man in this entire room filled with polished lies. But before I could move, a cluster of guests near the champagne tower covered their mouths, giggling like children. "Is that her father?" one of them murmured loudly enough for half the table to hear. "I thought staff had uniforms." A man snorted. "Looks like he walked straight out of a workshop." Did she seriously let him in like that? My shoulders stiffened. Heat crawled up my neck. But nothing prepared me for the voice that joined them. Vanessa Blackwell, my future sister-in-law, dripping in rose gold satin, and disdain arched a brow and laughed. "Well, what did you expect?" She didn't come from money. It was only a matter of time before her roots showed. Something inside me trembled, but I forced myself to stay calm. I could handle Vanessa. She had always been like this. But then Gavin walked toward me, my fiancé, immaculately groomed, handsome in his tailored tux, the man I'd loved for 2 years. He leaned close, pretending to fix my veil, and whispered under his breath, "Just let him be. Don't create a scene tonight." A scene. Defending my father was a scene. I pulled back slightly, searching Gavin's eyes for softness, for understanding, for anything that acknowledged the sacrifice my father had made for me all my life. But his gaze had already shifted to the crowd, to appearances, to control. I swallowed the hurt, pushing it down as far as it could go. The ceremony coordinator signaled us to take our places for the family photos. Bridesmaids gathered. Groomsmen straightened their ties. Gavin's parents, Elaine and Marcus Blackwell, glided toward the stage like royalty taking their thrones. And my father remained in the corner, still holding his hat, trying not to take up space. No. Not tonight. Not ever again. I stepped off the stage and walked toward him, the train of my gown whispering across the marble as the entire hall fell into uneasy silence. "Dad," I said softly, offering my arm. "Come stand with me." His eyes widened. "Sweetheart, no. This is your night. I want you with me, I whispered. He hesitated. Then he placed his trembling hand into mine. We walked together toward the stage, and that was when the world I thought I was joining revealed its true face. A hush fell. Gavin stiffened. Elaine lifted a manicured hand to her chest, as though offended by the mere sight of us approaching. Marcus Blackwell exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening, and then Vanessa's voice cut through the silence like a knife dipped in poison. "Oh, come on! Is he seriously going up there? This is a wedding photo, not a charity parade." Laughter erupted, harsh, cold, unrestrained. It washed over us in waves. My father froze beside me. His grip slackened. His smile faltered, not fully, not completely, but just enough for me to see something break behind his eyes. "Amelia," he whispered. "It's fine. Really." But it wasn't fine. It was the single worst moment of my life. Gavin stepped forward quickly, panic in his eyes. Not for my father, not for me, but for his family's reputation. "Amelia!" he hissed. "Stop this! You're making things uncomfortable. Uncomfortable for who?" I whispered. For everyone watching, he snapped. And that was it. The floor beneath my feet felt like it opened, not into darkness, but into clarity. A clarity sharp enough to cut, sharp enough to finally make me see what I had been refusing to see for months, maybe years. This wasn't my family. This wasn't my future. This wasn't love. It was a gilded cage wrapped in diamonds and venom. I took a breath that felt like the first real breath I'd taken since stepping into their world. Then I lifted my bouquet, the symbol of everything I had pretended tonight would be, and I dropped it. The thud echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. "I'm done," I said quietly at first, then louder, letting every single person in the room hear the truth that had been burning in my chest. "This wedding is over." Chaos exploded instantly. People gasped. Someone shouted. Vanessa let out a shrill laugh, thinking it was a joke. Gavin's face drained of color. Elaine staggered. Marcus cursed under his breath, but I didn't stay to watch their reactions. I turned to my father, took his hand, and walked him off the stage, off that platform built on lies, toward the exit glowing softly in the distance. As we stepped out through the tall glass doors and into the cool night air, the noise behind us faded. The music drowned beneath the sound of my heartbeat. Dad squeezed my hand. "Sweetheart," he murmured, voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I ruined your day." I stopped walking. I looked at the man who worked 2 jobs to raise me, who sold his tools to pay my college tuition, who taught me kindness even when the world gave him cruelty. "You didn't ruin anything," I whispered. "They ruined it. And I'm done pretending they didn't." He opened his mouth to speak, but emotion strangled his voice. We walked in silence to his old truck parked at the far end of the lot. The same truck people had mocked earlier as unfit for a wedding crowd. The same truck in which he had driven me to school, to my first job interview, to the emergency room when I broke my ankle. I didn't feel ashamed climbing into it. I felt safe. As the engine rumbled to life, I rested my head against the seat, the lace of my dress scratching lightly against my skin. Dad cleared his throat. "Amelia, you were brave tonight." I shook my head. I was angry. He hesitated. Then he said a sentence that made my stomach tighten without knowing why. "There's something I've never told you. Something your mother wanted you to know one day." I frowned, turning toward him. "Dad? What do you mean?" He kept his eyes on the road, hands steady at the wheel. "I'll explain when we get home," he said softly. "Tonight you've lost something you thought you wanted. But you're going to gain something bigger than you ever imagined." I wanted to question him, but exhaustion pulled me under. I closed my eyes as streetlights flickered past the windows. Somewhere between the city and the coastline, I drifted in and out of sleep, dreaming of lace tearing, of whispers dissolving, of my father's hand in mine. When I opened my eyes again, we were turning into the gravel driveway of our little wooden house by the lake, the home I'd grown up in, the home that smelled like cedar and warmth and unconditional love. Dad parked, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment in silence. Then he looked at me with eyes full of something I couldn't name. "Sweetheart," he said quietly, "it's time you know the truth about our family, about who your mother was, about who I am." He paused, took a breath, and whispered with trembling certainty, "I'm not the man they think I am. And I'm not the man you think I am either." The night air felt suddenly electric around me. "What are you saying, Dad?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small silver key, the kind that belonged to a safe, not a toolbox. A key I had never seen before. My heart pounded. "I'm saying," he murmured, "that the poor old man they mocked tonight is a billionaire." I stared at him, breath stolen from my lungs. The world didn't tilt. It shattered. And for the first time that night, for the first time in months, I had no idea what tomorrow would bring. But it would not be the future the Blackwells tried to force on me. It would be something entirely new. Dad didn't say another word as he stepped out of the truck, the gravel cracking beneath his old boots. The silver key glinted faintly in the porch light, swinging gently between his fingers, as though the weight of it had been waiting years to be lifted. I followed him slowly, still half in disbelief, half terrified that I had misheard everything he'd just said. Billionaire. The word didn't fit the man walking beside me in a coat he'd owned since I was a teenager, the man who saved plastic grocery bags and reused them until the print faded. But tonight nothing made sense anymore. My life had cracked open, and the truth, whatever it was spilling out whether I was ready or not. Inside the house, the warm scent of cedar and old books wrapped around me. This place had always been my anchor, the one constant in a world that kept shifting under my feet. Dad flicked on the lamp by the sofa, casting a pool of amber light across the small living room. Everything looked the same. The photographs of Mom on the wall, her soft smile frozen in time. The crocheted blanket she made draped over the couch. The ceramic mug collection Dad swore he'd downsize but never did. It was all familiar, safe. And yet the air felt strange, charged like the moment before lightning strikes. Dad sat down slowly, placing the key on the coffee table as though it were something sacred. I sat across from him, hands clasped tightly in my lap, still wearing the remnants of my ruined wedding gown. My mascara had smudged down my cheeks, creating faint shadows beneath my eyes. I didn't care. He studied me for a long moment before speaking. "I know tonight hurt you in ways I can't take back," he said quietly. "And I know the humiliation they threw at me made you feel like you were choosing between love and loyalty. But Amelia, what happened in that ballroom wasn't your fault. And it wasn't humiliation to me. It was a reminder. A reminder." My voice cracked. "Of what, Dad?" He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "Of why I've kept my life quiet. Why I've lived small, even when I didn't have to." The words tightened something in my chest. "Dad, I don't understand. You said you're a billionaire. How? When? Why would you hide something like that?" His eyes softened. "Sit back, sweetheart. Let me explain." I drew a breath and nodded, bracing myself. "It started long before you were born," he began. "Your mother and we didn't come from the same world either. Catherine was brilliant, sharp as a tack. She could read a balance sheet like poetry. She worked her way up every ladder she touched, got promoted faster than anyone expected. She caught the attention of people who weren't used to hearing no. And she wasn't afraid to say it. A heaviness settled over him as he spoke her name. She wasn't born wealthy. But when her parents passed away, she inherited a sizable amount properties, stocks, an early investment in a tech company before it exploded. She didn't let the money make her arrogant. She used it to build a future. And she trusted me to build one with her." He smiled faintly. "I didn't care about the money. I cared about her. But she was smart. She knew wealth changed people, and she didn't want it changing you." My breath caught. "You kept everything from me because of Mom." He nodded. She asked me to. She wanted you to grow up grounded, compassionate, unspoiled. She didn't want you to attract people who only saw dollar signs. Something inside me twisted. Suddenly, Gavin's face, his perfectly controlled smile, the cold flicker of annoyance whenever my father spoke, felt like a warning I should have noticed. Dad continued. So I lived simply, wore old clothes, drove the same truck. I kept every account private and every investment quiet. I didn't want the world to look at you and see opportunity. I wanted them to see you. The truth hit me hard. You did all of that for me. He reached out, taking my hand gently. I did it because it was the only promise I made to your mother that I knew I could keep. Tears stung my eyes again, but this time not from humiliation, from gratitude, from grief, from the feeling of finally seeing my father's heart clearly. Before I could speak, Dad's expression shifted, something deeper, heavier clouding his eyes. There's more you need to know, he said softly. And tonight proved its time. He picked up the key from the table and stood. I followed him down the hall past the framed photos and the faded wallpaper to the small locked room he'd always kept off limits. When I was a child, I thought it held Christmas presents or something fragile. As I grew older, I stopped asking. I respected his privacy. Now the truth was waiting behind that door. Dad inserted the key, turned it, and pushed the door open. A soft click echoed through the hallway. Inside, the room smelled of old paper and cedar. A single desk lamp illuminated stacks of files, notebooks, envelopes, and a black steel safe bolted to the floor. Dusty shelves lined the walls, but everything inside the room was meticulously organized, years of purpose, hidden behind a locked door. Dad walked straight to the safe and knelt down. This, he said, touching the handle, is why I'm telling you everything. He entered a combination I'd never seen him use, and with a slow metallic groan, the safe opened. My breath hitched. Inside were documents, thick-bound financial statements, legal contracts, property deeds, a navy blue folder embossed with the logo of a major tech giant, a collection of sealed envelopes, each labeled with dates that spanned decades. And on top of everything else lay a photo of my mother smiling at the camera, her hand resting protectively over her pregnant belly. I pressed a hand to my chest. Dad, this is your inheritance, he said softly. The one thing your mother wanted to protect. And the reason I let those people mock me tonight? I stared at him, confused. What does any of this have to do with the wedding? His voice dropped lower. Because if I had shown up in a tailored suit, or stepped out of a luxury car, or if anyone knew who I really am, you would never know who they really are. He paused. You wouldn't have seen their cruelty. The truth sank into me slowly, painfully. He'd allowed their insults, their disdain, their humiliations. He let them reveal themselves to me. You let them treat you like that, I whispered. You let them humiliate you, just to show me who they were. He nodded. They needed to show you, not me. A sob caught in my throat, not a weak one, a wounded, guttural sound that clawed its way out as the reality of everything crashed down over me. Dad reached for my shoulders, steadying me. Sweetheart, tonight you defended me. You walked away from everything they offered. That told me you're ready to know the truth. You're ready to carry what comes next. What comes next? I asked, barely breathing. He reached into the safe and pulled out a thick leather binder, the same one I'd seen him open once years ago when he thought I was asleep. He set it on the desk, opened it, and turned it toward me. Inside were transfers of ownership, stock acquisition certificates, letters from attorneys, deeds for properties, and numerical figures that made my head spin. Millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. And then my mother's name printed beside a percentage that made my knees weaken. This wasn't accidental wealth. This was an empire. Dad watched my expression, his voice steady but tinged with pain. Your mother built the foundation of this. I grew it, quietly, patiently, and I kept every bit of it hidden because I wanted you to choose your life freely, not because of what you'd inherit. I pressed a trembling hand against my mouth. I never knew. I never even suspected. He smiled sadly. I hoped you wouldn't, for your own sake. But he wasn't finished. He reached for another folder, red, worn at the corners, marked only with a single handwritten word. Dawn. My breath hitched. What is that? Dad hesitated. For the first time tonight, fear flickered in his eyes. Something your mother discovered before she died. Something tied to the Blackwells. A cold wave rippled through me. He placed the folder in front of me gently, almost reverently. Amelia, your mother didn't just leave us wealth. She left us unfinished business. My pulse quickened. Dad, what are you saying? He met my gaze steadily. I'm saying your mother didn't trust the Blackwells, and she was right not to. I'm saying her accident wasn't just an accident, and I'm saying the truth about that family runs deeper than the humiliation you saw tonight. The room spun. My father, my quiet, gentle, selfless father, had been living with a secret that could destroy an empire, a secret that now belonged to me. I gripped the edge of the desk, trying to steady myself. Why tell me now? I whispered. Because tonight, he said softly, you proved something I needed to see. You proved you won't let power corrupt you. And you proved you won't tolerate injustice, not even when it costs you everything. I swallowed hard, overwhelmed. Dad rested a hand over mine. And because your mother wanted you to know that the world isn't always kind, but it always rewards courage. My throat tightened. Dad, I don't know what to do next. He closed the safe, locked it, and stood placing a warm, steady hand on my shoulder. You don't have to know tonight, he said. You just need to rest. Tomorrow, we start at the beginning, and I'll tell you everything. I nodded slowly, my mind swirling with fear, awe, grief, and something new, something fierce rising in the hollow left by heartbreak. Strength, the kind I inherited long before I knew it. Dad turned off the lamp, guiding me toward the hallway. As we walked, I looked back one last time at the darkened room, the safe, the red folder glowing faintly in my memory. My wedding day had ended in ruins. But somewhere in that wreckage, a new life, a truer life was beginning. And I could feel it. Everything I thought I knew was gone, and everything I needed to know was waiting for me in that locked room. Dad's words echoed in my head long after he guided me to my old bedroom. The same room with pale yellow walls, the same quilt my mother stitched, the same window overlooking the lake. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had changed. I sat on the edge of the bed in silence, still wearing the tattered remains of my wedding gown fingertips brushing over the fraying lace, as though the fabric itself held answers I didn't yet know how to face. My heart felt split clean in half, one part grieving the life I had walked away from, the other part bracing itself for whatever truth my father was ready to uncover. I didn't sleep. My mind replayed every moment of the night, the mocking laughter, Gavin's cold eyes, the bouquet hitting the marble floor, the shock on my father's face when I pulled him onto the stage, the quiet pain he tried so hard to hide. And beneath it all, the startling revelation he whispered into the shadows. I'm a billionaire. By the time the first faint streaks of dawn crept across the sky, exhaustion tugged at my limbs, but my thoughts refused to settle. I slipped out of bed and walked barefoot into the hallway. The house was still except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. I found Dad in the kitchen, already awake, already dressed, already making coffee like he always did, as if last night hadn't shattered the foundation of my world. He looked up when I entered. Did you sleep at all? He asked gently. I shook my head. Did you? I dozed for a bit, he admitted, then handed me a cup of coffee. You're going to need this. I took a sip, letting the warmth steady my trembling hands. Dad. I began quietly. I need to know everything. No more protecting me. No more waiting. Tell me who Mom really was. Tell me what she discovered. Tell me why you kept all of this in the dark. He studied me for a moment, his gaze heavy with the kind of sorrow that had been buried too deep for too long. Then he nodded. Come with me. We walked back to the locked room. He unlocked the door again, and I felt the same rush of cold air, the same weight of secrets pressing against my skin. Sit, he said, gesturing toward the chair beside the desk. This isn't an easy story to tell. I braced myself as he opened the red folder labeled Dawn. Your mother chose that name? He said softly. She always believed the truth would come to light eventually. He pulled out a faded photograph first. My mother stood beside a young woman in an office building, both confident, both bright-eyed, both full of promise. I didn't recognize the other woman. That's your mother with her closest colleague, Julia Kerr, Dad explained. They started in the same firm together. Smart, driven, exceptional women in a field dominated by men twice their age. Dad set the photo down gently. At that time, Marcus Blackwell was already a rising name in the world of corporate finance. He had influence connections, and a reputation for using both in ruthless ways. A chill crawled down my arms. Your mother and Julia uncovered something while they were auditing a set of accounts belonging to one of Blackwell's subsidiary firms. Money that didn't add up, funds being rerouted, offshore accounts tied to shell companies. They brought it to their supervisor. Instead of investigating, he warned them to leave it alone. I frowned. Why? Because the supervisor was being paid to look the other way. Dad replied simply, Your mother didn't back down. She was too principled for that. And she believed exposing the truth could save the company and its employees. He hesitated, jaw tightening. But the more she pushed, the more dangerous it became. My pulse quickened. Dangerous how Julia received anonymous threats, Dad said. Letters shoved under her car windshield. Phone calls late at night. Your mother, too. Blackwell wasn't a man who tolerated interference. My breath caught. Did she tell you everything? Not at first, Dad said, pain flickering across his face. She didn't want to burden me. But when Julia died, suddenly everything changed. A cold shock rippled through me. She died? How a car accident on Highway 12. Dad said quietly. The police ruled it mechanical failure. But your mother didn't believe that. Not for a second. The edges of my vision blurred. My mother's own fatal accident had always been described the same way. A mechanical failure, a coincidence, a tragedy without answers. Dad, I whispered, are you saying Mom thought Julia's crash wasn't accidental? He looked away. She was terrified. She thought she was being watched. She didn't sleep. She kept every document she collected locked away. She made copies and hid them somewhere only she knew. And she told me, if anything ever happened to her, I needed to protect you first. Then finish what she started. My heart twisted. And then she died, I said softly. He nodded, eyes brimming. 3 weeks after Julia. Same stretch of highway, same story. Another mechanical failure, another coincidence. I felt my breath falter as realization settled like lead in my stomach. Dad, why didn't you tell the police? Why didn't you fight this? He slammed the safe shut with more force than necessary. I tried. God knows I tried. But the police dismissed me, said I was grieving, said I was desperate to make sense of a tragedy. One officer even implied I wanted someone to blame. He sank into the chair opposite me, shoulders slumping. But I knew. I knew she didn't just die. I knew Blackwell didn't forget loose ends. And you hid because... I began. He nodded. Because I had you, a 3-year-old little girl who just lost her mother. If I kept digging, I would have lost you too. Silence fell thick, suffocating, heartbreaking. I felt everything all at once: grief for a mother I never got to know, fear for a father who carried the weight alone, anger at a family that had clawed their way to power on the backs of secrets and blood, and beneath it all, a rising determination. "What about the documents Mom collected?" I asked. "Are they here?" Dad shook his head. "No. She hid them somewhere else. Somewhere she believed no one would look. But she left behind clues." He laid out several envelopes, each labeled with a date in my mother's handwriting. "These are the only pieces she kept with her. They're fragments. Enough to suggest wrongdoing, not enough to stand in court. And the rest," I whispered. "Gone," he said. "Or at least, hidden." I ran my fingers over my mother's writing. It felt like touching her hand through time. Dad reached beneath the desk again and pulled out a small wooden box, polished but old. He placed it gently in front of me. "She left this for you," he said, voice rough. "She wrote that I should give it to you when I felt you were ready." My hands trembled as I opened the lid. Inside was a delicate locket with a tiny engraving, "For Amelia when the dawn comes." I opened it carefully. Inside was a folded slip of paper, yellowed at the edges. I unfolded it slowly. "Amelia, the truth is not a weapon. It is a lantern. One day you will need it. Let it guide you. Love, Mom." Tears slipped silently down my face. I clutched the locket to my chest, feeling a connection I'd longed for my entire life. Dad rested a hand on my back. "Your mother believed in justice. She believed in your future. She believed the truth would find its way through you." I wiped my cheeks. "Dad, why did you finally tell me everything tonight?" He let out a shaky breath. "Because last night when I saw you walk away from the Blackwells, when I saw your strength, I knew you were no longer the child I needed to protect. You were the woman Catherine knew you'd become." I swallowed a lump in my throat. "And what happens now?" He looked at me with a resolve that felt like steel. "Now we follow your mother's trail," he said. "Now we uncover what she couldn't. Now we finish what she started." A fierce spark ignited in my chest. Anger, purpose, vengeance, and a deep, unwavering love for the woman whose shadow still lived in every corner of this house. But Dad wasn't finished. "There's something else," he added quietly. "Something important. Something I couldn't tell you until I knew you were ready." He opened another drawer and pulled out a slim stack of documents. "These are early ownership records," he said. "Your mother bought shares in what eventually became Blackwell Realty Holdings. Before Marcus Blackwell took it private. Before he rewrote the company's entire structure." I stared at him. "Are you saying Mom owned part of the Blackwell empire?" A slow, grim smile touched his lips. "She didn't just own part of it. She owned enough to challenge their claim to everything." My mind reeled. "Then why don't they know?" His smile grew darker. "Because she bought them under a pseudonym. And I continued the purchases quietly over the years. Hidden. Untraceable. Waiting." I stared at him in disbelief, waiting for what I whispered. For the moment, the Blackwells crossed a line we could no longer ignore. The wedding, the humiliation, the cruelty. The line had been drawn. Dad placed a hand on my shoulder. "Sweetheart, they have no idea who they insulted last night, no idea what your mother left behind, no idea what you are now entitled to claim." I felt my breath catch. "Claim, Dad? What exactly are you saying?" He met my gaze steady and calm. "I'm saying, Amelia, you're not just my daughter. You're not just Catherine's daughter. You are the rightful heir to a portion of the Blackwell empire. And if we uncover your mother's full evidence..." He paused, eyes burning with purpose. "You won't just claim a piece of it. You could take it from them entirely." A chill ran down my spine. Not fear, not caution, but something deeper. Destiny. Dad closed the folder gently as though sealing a pact. "You walked away from that wedding with nothing," he said softly, "but you walked toward something far more powerful." I held the locket tightly. "The dawn," I whispered. He nodded. "Your mother always knew it would come." Outside the window, sunlight finally broke over the lake, scattering gold across the surface. A new morning, a new truth, a new beginning, and I felt it deep in my bones that I was no longer running from the Blackwells. I was walking toward them. The morning after my father revealed the truth felt strangely quiet, as if the world was holding its breath while waiting to see what I would do with everything I had learned. Sunlight filtered through the curtains in thin, shimmering lines, casting a warm glow across the living room. Dad sat at the kitchen table, reading glasses perched low on his nose, sifting through a stack of old documents like a man returning to a battlefield he once fled. I stood by the window sipping coffee that had long gone cold, staring out at the lake. The water was impossibly still. A mirror. A question. Who was I now? Last night, I was a bride walking away from a future built on lies. Now I was the daughter of a woman who died protecting a truth she never got to reveal. The daughter of a quiet billionaire who had spent decades hiding in plain sight. And somehow, without wanting it, without preparing for it, I had become the only person left who could finish what she started. I turned to Dad. "We can't do this alone." He looked up from the papers. "I know. Then we need help." My voice sounded steadier than I expected, fueled by a fire that had grown slowly through the night. "Someone who can dig where we can't. Someone with resources." Dad nodded thoughtfully. "Not many people I trust with this." "We don't need many," I said. "Just the right one." His lips quirked in a knowing half-smile. "I have someone in mind." He reached for a dusty Rolodex from the top shelf, a relic from another era, and flipped through the cards with practiced fingers until he found the one he wanted. He handed it to me. "Her name is Olivia Reyes," he said. "Your mother mentored her once years ago, sharp as a blade, strategic, quiet. And she never forgave what happened to Catherine." I studied the name. "Is she still in the industry?" "Private investigations," he said. "She left her corporate job after seeing too much corruption. Now she handles cases most people wouldn't dare touch. Will she help us?" Dad's eyes softened. "She'll help you. You're Catherine's daughter." We dialed her number. It rang twice. Reyes. Her voice was cool, precise. Someone used to navigating dangerous territory. "Olivia." Dad said, "It's Henry Ford." A long pause followed. "Henry," she said finally, tone shifting into something softer, heavier. "What do you need?" "I need you to come to the house." Another pause. "I'll be there in an hour." Dad hung up, leaning back in his chair. "Brace yourself," he said. "She's a force." An hour later, a sleek charcoal sedan pulled into our driveway. A woman stepped out, early 40s, tall, poised, her dark hair pulled into a sharp ponytail. She wore a tailored coat and carried a leather portfolio under her arm. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who knew how dangerous the world was and had learned to walk through it anyway. When she entered the house, her eyes landed on me first. She studied me, really studied me, as though comparing me to someone she once knew. "You're Catherine's girl," she said. I swallowed. "Yes. Amelia." She nodded once, then turned to Dad. "Why now? After all these years?" "Because they came for her again," Dad replied. "Not with threats, with insults, humiliation." And Amelia stood up, walked away. Olivia's eyes flicked to me with renewed interest. "Good," she said. "Catherine would have wanted that." We sat at the table. Dad slid the red folder toward her. She opened it, flipping through the documents with a sharp, focused intensity. She paused at certain pages, frowning, tapping her finger on margin notes my mother had written. After several minutes, she closed the folder and exhaled. "This isn't everything," she said. "These are fragments. Enough to raise suspicion, not enough to burn them." "We know," I said quietly. Mom hid the rest. Olivia nodded. "The evidence she collected, if it still exists, would be explosive. The Blackwell empire is built on clean optics and ruthless secrecy. If Catherine found a crack..." She leaned back. "Then we're looking at financial fraud, money laundering, falsified audits, offshore accounts. Crimes that could dismantle them entirely." Dad's jaw clenched. "That's why she died." Most likely, Olivia agreed. My hands tightened around my coffee cup. "So what do we do?" Olivia folded her arms. "We start by understanding what Catherine knew and where she went. Every file she touched, every office she visited, every person she trusted. If she hid evidence, she didn't hide it here. She would have placed it where she believed only the right person could find it." "Who's the right person?" I whispered. "You," Olivia said simply. The word landed heavily. I wasn't ready for it. But maybe readiness didn't matter anymore. Dad cleared his throat. "There's something else we've discovered." He showed her the ownership documents, the hidden shares my mother had purchased before Blackwell took the company private. Olivia's eyes widened. This is leverage." "What kind of leverage?" I asked. "The kind that terrifies powerful people," she replied. "If these shares were acquired legally, and they appear to be, then Amelia has an unchallenged claim. The Blackwells would do anything to bury this." A cold realization seeped into me. "Dad, if they would kill Mom for exposing financial corruption..." He nodded. "They'd kill to protect ownership, too." Silence fell. Thick. Heavy. Final. Olivia broke it. "We move carefully," she said. Quietly. No sudden noise. No confrontation until we understand the full landscape. "And Gavin," I asked, the name tasting bitter on my tongue. "Did he know anything about this?" Olivia hesitated. "Not directly. He never handled his father's darker dealings. Marcus kept him intentionally clean, public-facing, charming, presentable. But naive. Useful." My stomach twisted. A mixture of betrayal grief and something else relief. Relief that walking away from him had not been a mistake. Olivia continued. "But make no mistake, if he learns what you're holding, he will side with his family." Dad nodded grimly. "Which is why we need to keep Amelia safe." The room suddenly felt colder. "Safe?" I asked. "You think they'd come after me?" Dad reached across the table, taking my hand. "Sweetheart, if the Blackwells even suspect you're digging into Catherine's files, they will stop at nothing to silence you." A chill ran through me, sharp and immediate. "Then why are we doing this?" Olivia answered before Dad could. "Because your mother died trying to do the right thing. And because powerful families don't crumble from the top, they crumble when the truth they buried refuses to stay buried." I swallowed hard. "So where do we start?" She opened her portfolio. Inside were neatly organized documents, maps, photographs, old employee records. "I've spent years quietly gathering fragments of my own," she said. Information about the Blackwell network, their shell companies, their offshore accounts, their charitable fronts, even some of their partners. She laid a photograph of Marcus Blackwell on the table, smiling confidently beside a charity banner. "A man who hides behind philanthropy is almost always hiding something bigger," she said. She placed another photograph, this one of Gavin looking polished at a gala with a shadow of Marcus lurking behind him like a puppeteer. "And a man who marries into wealth often ends up a pawn." I looked away, the wound still fresh. Olivia cleared her throat. "There's a location your mother visited repeatedly in the weeks before her death, a storage facility near the old financial district. She made payments in cash. No rental agreements in her legal name. But the timing lines up with the days she told you she was working late. My breath caught. You think she hid the missing evidence there? It's possible, Olivia said. It's the strongest lead I've found. Dad nodded slowly. I avoided that place for years. Too many painful memories, too much fear about what I might find. I placed a hand on his arm. Then we'll do it together. Olivia closed the folder. We go today. Dad blinked. Today? Yes, she said firmly. The Blackwells will be busy handling the wedding fallout for at least 48 hours. They won't suspect anything in the meantime. It's the safest window we'll ever have. Dad hesitated only a moment before nodding. Let's go. We gathered the essentials copies of Mom's notes, the locket, my phone, a spare set of gloves Olivia handed us just in case. I changed into jeans and a sweater, pulling my hair into a low ponytail, leaving behind the last pieces of my ruined gown on the bathroom floor. As we headed to the car, I felt a strange mix of dread and empowerment. Last night I had been a girl running away from a wedding. Today I was walking toward a truth that had been waiting years to be found. The drive was eerily quiet. Olivia sat in the passenger seat of her own car, leading us. Dad drove with both hands tight on the wheel, jaw-set eyes distant, as if replaying every moment with Mom. I stared out the window at the thinning trees, the stretch of road curling like a question mark ahead. When we finally arrived, the storage facility stood at the edge of an industrial district. Faded metal doors cracked concrete rows of units stretching into the distance like silent witnesses. Olivia parked and stepped out. The unit she visited was 117, she said. It hasn't been rented in years. The management rotated so quickly that no one noticed the irregular history. Dad exhaled shakily. 117, he repeated. Catherine's birthday. My heart squeezed. We approached the row of units. The numbers passed one by one. 113, 114, 115, 116, then 117. The metal door was rusted, padlocked cobwebs clinging to the corners. Olivia kneeled down, inspecting the lock. This looks original, she said. No signs of forced entry. Whatever she placed inside, it's still here. She stood. Ready. I looked at Dad. He nodded. Olivia snapped the lock open with a tool, and together we lifted the door. Dust swirled in the stale air. Inside the unit was a single wooden trunk. Nothing else. My hands shook as I stepped forward. Dad placed a stabilizing hand between my shoulder blades. Go ahead, sweetheart, he whispered. She meant this for you. I knelt before the trunk and slowly lifted the lid. The smell of old paper and lavender drifted out. Inside were file folders, photographs, USB drives, notebooks, and on top a single envelope with my name written in my mother's elegant script. My vision blurred instantly. I picked it up with trembling fingers. Amelia. Dad knelt beside me, eyes shining. Olivia watched silently, respectfully. I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. My hands trembled as I read my mother's words for the first time in decades, words she had written for a future she hoped I would one day be strong enough to face. And as her voice reached across time and loss to speak to me, I knew without a shred of doubt this was only the beginning. The paper trembled in my hands long before I realized it wasn't the paper. It was me. My mother's handwriting stretched across the page in soft, looping strokes, each letter carrying a warmth that reached through the years and laid a gentle palm against my heart. Dad knelt beside me, silent, reverent, like he was watching Catherine herself step back into the room. Olivia stood near the entrance of the storage unit, her sharp gaze softening as she sensed the shift in the air. I drew a breath and began reading. My dearest Amelia, if you are holding this letter, it means the truth has finally found you. It always does. I'm so sorry I cannot be with you when you read this. But I need you to know that everything I did, every risk, every fear, every long night, was for you. For the woman I believed you would someday become. My vision blurred instantly. The words bent and swam, but I kept reading. I have uncovered something dangerous. Something powerful men would rather die than let the world find out. If they cannot silence me, they will try to silence the truth itself. So I am leaving pieces of that truth behind, hidden where greed cannot reach, and where courage will eventually lead you. Dad exhaled shakily beside me. I felt his hand on my shoulder, anchoring me, grounding me as I swallowed back the knot rising in my throat. The letter continued. Do not be afraid, Amelia. Fear is what they count on. You must be brave where I no longer can be. You must see what I can no longer show you, and you must protect what I can no longer guard. The words blurred again. I blinked them into clarity. There is someone you will need, someone who loves you enough to walk beside you through darkness and dawn. Your father. He may appear ordinary to the world, but he is extraordinary in the ways that matter. Trust him. Always. My heart cracked. Dad covered his mouth, shoulders trembling. Love. Mom. My hand drifted to my chest, to the small locket still warm against my skin. I held the letter close, absorbing every word, every ounce of my mother's voice echoing across a lifetime of silence. When I finally looked up, Olivia's eyes glistened not with tears, but with a fierce, protective energy. She nodded at the trunk. We need to see what else she left. Dad helped me place the letter back in its envelope, then gently shifted the trunk's contents so we could sort through them. The air inside the storage unit seemed to grow thicker with each layer we peeled back, each secret that emerged from the dust. The first stack of documents was straightforward bank transfers, financial statements, copies of shell company filings, a map of money trails, evidence of fraud. Olivia's eyes narrowed. She was tracking the Blackwell offshore network. Some of these names, they're still active. Dad pulled out a folder labeled Marlin Group. This was one of their earliest shell companies, he said quietly. Marcus funneled millions through it during the acquisition years. And hid it as real estate assets, Olivia muttered. Typical. I sifted deeper and found a black notebook. I opened it carefully. Inside were my mother's handwritten notes. Page after page of timestamps, names, meeting dates, irregular transactions, whistleblower conversations. A lifetime of truth captured in ink. I whispered, she documented everything. Olivia nodded. Enough to force an inquiry. Enough to destroy them. Enough to get her killed. Dad added, voice breaking. We kept going. Under the documents were photographs, grainy snapshots taken from a distance. Marcus Blackwell shaking hands with a man I didn't recognize. Gavin's mother, Elaine, slipping into an unmarked car late at night. A warehouse bearing the logo of a shipping company tied to tax evasion scandals. My pulse quickened as I held up the photo of Marcus. What is this blackmail? Olivia said simply. Insurance. She was preparing to expose them. Dad rubbed his eyes. Your mother wasn't reckless. She gathered evidence carefully. But she trusted the wrong person. Olivia stiffened. Who Dad swallowed? Her supervisor. The one she reported to when she found the discrepancies. Olivia's jaw clenched. Richards. The name struck like a cold knife. You know him? I asked. Oh yes, she replied tightly. He and Marcus were closer than anyone realized. Catherine, trusting him, sealed her fate. I felt the room tilt slightly. The ground beneath my knees felt unstable, as though the truth was pulling at me, unraveling the version of my childhood I had believed in. I pushed further into the trunk. At the bottom was a small metal lockbox. With trembling hands, I lifted it out. Dad, I whispered, do you know what this is? He stared at it. She bought that box the week before she died. She wouldn't tell me what was inside. The lockbox had no key. Olivia reached into her coat and pulled out a slim tool, slipping it easily into the keyhole. Within seconds, the latch clicked open. Inside was a single USB drive, a tiny, innocuous object. But the moment Olivia saw it, her breath caught. This may be everything, she whispered. If she digitized the files she couldn't carry or hide physically. Dad sank onto a nearby crate. My God. I turned the USB over in my hand. It was unmarked. Do we open it now? I asked. Dad nodded slowly. Not here. It might carry security risks. And we don't know what protections she put on it. Olivia agreed. We take it home. I have equipment that can open it safely. We packed everything carefully, layering documents, notebooks, and drives into Olivia's reinforced briefcase. When we lifted the trunk's lid to close it, I noticed something wedged in the back corner. A sealed envelope, with my mother's handwriting again. This one was addressed not to me, but to my father. My breath stalled. Dad, this is for you. His face crumpled as he took the envelope. His hands trembled while unsealing it, and I leaned close, reading over his shoulder as he unfolded a single page. Henry, if I do not return, please forgive me. I know you told me to stop. I know you were right. But I could not look myself in the mirror if I let them continue. If anything happens to me, promise me 2 things. Raise Amelia away from this darkness, and only give her the truth when she is strong enough to choose what to do with it. She is her father's courage and her mother's fire. She will know what to do. Yours always, Catherine. Silence stretched through the storage unit like a cord too heavy to break. Dad pressed the letter to his chest. Tears slid down his cheeks. Quiet, unfiltered grief he had held back for decades. I wrapped my arms around him. For a long moment we held each other, grief and love, binding us as tightly as the secrets hidden in the trunk. After a while, Olivia cleared her throat softly. We should go. The longer we stay here, the more risk we take. Dad nodded and wiped his face. I closed the trunk gently and helped carry the boxes to the car. As we loaded everything, I felt a shift. Something in the world around me seemed sharper, the air colder, the shadows heavier. When Olivia shut the trunk of her car, she paused, scanning the perimeter with narrowed eyes. Something wrong? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Her gaze swept the empty lot, the road, the abandoned office building across the street. Then she said quietly, We weren't followed. But someone else has been here recently. Dad stiffened. How can you tell? The dust patterns, she said, pointing to faint footprints near another unit. Someone came through within the last week, someone who knew what they were looking for. A chill spiraled down my spine. You think? Yes, she said. The Blackwells. My stomach dropped. Dad stepped protectively in front of me. We need to leave. Now. We drove home in a tight formation, Olivia leading Dad following closely behind. Every car that passed us felt like a threat. Every shadow along the road felt like eyes watching. When we finally pulled into our driveway, Dad exhaled deeply, but Olivia remained on alert. Inside the house, she set up her equipment on the dining table. The USB drive sat in the center like a ticking bomb. This may take a while, she said. Your mother encrypted her files. She was smarter than all of us. Dad forced a weary smile. Yes, she was. While Olivia worked, I stepped onto the porch to breathe. The lake glimmered under the afternoon sun, peaceful, untouched by the chaos unraveling the ground beneath my feet. I touched the locket again. Mom, I whispered, I wish you were here. When I turned to go back inside, I saw Dad standing in the doorway watching me with the softest, saddest smile. She is, he said. I walked toward him and he held the door open. Inside, Olivia straightened with a sharp inhale. I'm in. Dad and I rushed to her side. What did you find? I asked. Olivia clicked open the first file. My breath froze. It was a complete, time-stamped archive of every fraudulent transaction Catherine had uncovered. Names, dates, locations, offshore transfers. Shell corporations, bribes, all tied back to one man, Marcus Blackwell. Olivia pulled up the next file. Emails, threats, and then my heart stopped. Proof that the mechanical failure in my mother's car had been staged. My father's hand closed around mine, trembling. Olivia whispered, "Amelia, this is enough to destroy them." I stared at the screen pulse hammering. The Blackwell empire wasn't just corrupt, it was built on blood, and my mother had died trying to expose it. A slow, fierce heat ignited in my chest. Not rage, not vengeance, but something deeper. Purpose. I looked at Dad. "They took everything from her," I said softly. "And from you," he replied. I nodded, jaw steadying. "Then it's time," I said. Dad swallowed. "Time for what?" I met Olivia's eyes. To finish what she started. The decision settled inside me with a weight that was neither crushing nor frightening, but clarifying like a storm passing over water and revealing the reflection beneath. I stood in the center of the living room, the glow of Olivia's laptop still illuminating the final file we'd opened, and I felt something shift deep in my chest. The truth wasn't abstract anymore. It wasn't a theory. It wasn't a suspicion whispered in the dark. It was here, undeniable, staring back at me in timestamps, dollar trails, encrypted messages, and most damning of all, the evidence tying my mother's death to the Blackwell empire. Dad closed the laptop gently, as if shutting the lid might soften the blow of what we now knew. Olivia leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable, though her eyes burned with the same sharp fire that had been growing inside me since the moment I walked out of my ruined wedding. "We have enough to go public," she said. Dad stiffened. "No, not yet." I looked at him. "Dad." He shook his head resolute. "If we release this now without a plan, without knowing who the Blackwells have in their pocket, it could backfire. They have lawyers, influence, media contacts, money, and desperation." Olivia nodded slowly. "He's right. They'll bury this before it reaches a courtroom." My jaw tightened. "So what do we do?" Dad took a long breath. "We expose them from the inside." The room went silent. Olivia tilted her head, intrigued. "Meaning Dad met my gaze. Meaning Amelia walks back into their world not as Gavin's almost bride, not as a humiliated outsider, but as someone they underestimate. Someone who knows the truth. Someone who can get close enough to destroy them where it hurts most." My pulse thudded in my ears. "Dad, you want me to go back?" He approached me slowly, placing his hands on my shoulders. Not to ask forgiveness, not to reconcile, to infiltrate. I swallowed hard. The idea terrified me. It also electrified me. "They'll never suspect you," he said quietly. "Right now the Blackwells think they've won. They think you're broken, embarrassed. They think I'm nothing more than the poor old man they mocked." Olivia smirked. "Their arrogance is our advantage." I looked between them, feeling the gravity of the moment. But how, I asked? What reason would I have to return? Dad exchanged a glance with Olivia, and she gave a small smile. "You won't go back as a victim," she said. "You'll go back as someone seeking closure, someone trying to return a few belongings you left behind, someone whose pride was hurt, but who wants to end things gracefully." I winced at the idea of seeing Gavin again, at the thought of walking into the mansion where I'd almost said I do. Olivia continued, "Gavin will let you in. Marcus and Elaine will tolerate it for appearances. They don't want a public scandal. If you come back looking calm, they'll assume you've accepted the situation." And then I whispered. And then Dad said softly, "You watch. You listen. You gather information they would never reveal to anyone they consider a threat." My stomach twisted. "You're asking me to pretend." "I'm asking you to be brave," Dad corrected. "Your mother would have done this if she'd lived long enough." Olivia closed the laptop and stood. "Let's map this out." We moved to the dining table, spreading out documents and notebooks. Olivia drew a quick diagram, Blackwell Realty Holdings at the center with branches for each family member, each known associate, each subsidiary firm. "This isn't just a family," she said. "It's a machine, and every machine has weak points." Dad pointed to Marcus's branch. "He controls the finances. He's the architect of the fraud, but he also has the most to lose." Olivia pointed to Elaine. "She manages their social connections, charity events, fundraisers, philanthropic boards. She's the public face. If her credibility cracks, it spreads fast." My eyes moved to the last branch, Gavin. "And him?" I asked. Olivia exchanged a look with Dad before answering. "He's their shield. Polished, likable, safe. Investors trust him. Donors adore him. He's the only one who can make Marcus look respectable." Her voice softened slightly. "And he loves you in his own way." I froze. The words hit me with unexpected force. "He doesn't love me enough," I whispered. "No," Olivia agreed. "But he loves you enough to believe you're harmless, and that is your way in." Dad's jaw clenched, protective instinct rising again. "Amelia, if you don't want to do this..." But I raised my hand to stop him. "I want to." Both of them paused. I took a breath, feeling my resolve crystallize. Mom didn't die for nothing. She didn't collect all this evidence so it could rot in a storage unit. If I can get close enough to them to understand their current network, their allies, their panic points, then we can strike where it matters. Dad studied me, his eyes full of worry and pride all tangled together. "If they sense anything, they won't," I said. "They never really saw me at all." Olivia pulled up a timeline. "We'll need to move quickly. The media still doesn't know the wedding collapsed. The Blackwells will work fast to spin a narrative. This is our chance to stay ahead." I closed my eyes briefly, imagining it, walking into their mansion again. The cold marble floors. The staff trained not to look too long. Vanessa's smirk. Elaine's calculating gaze. Marcus's slow, condescending appraisal. And Gavin, the man I almost promised my life to, looking at me with pity or worse, indifference. Fear flickered in my chest, but beneath it burned something stronger. "I'll go tomorrow," I said. Dad's breath caught. "So soon? If I wait," I said, "I'll lose my nerve." Olivia nodded approvingly. "Good. We'll prepare." The rest of the day passed in a blur of planning. Olivia coached me on what to say, what not to say, how to deflect questions, how to let silence work in my favor. Dad pulled up old files showing the early years of my mother's investigation, helping me understand the patterns. But as dusk settled over the lake and the house filled with the familiar hum of cicadas, the weight of what I was about to do grew heavier. Later that night, I stepped outside alone, standing by the water as moonlight rippled across its surface. The cool air brushed against my skin, carrying the scent of pine and something older, something grounding. I whispered into the night, "Mom, I hope you're with me." Behind me, footsteps approached softly. "Dad." He didn't speak right away. He stood beside me, hands in his pockets, watching the moonlit reflection. "You remind me of her," he said finally. "Not just in looks, in spirit." I swallowed. "Do you think she'd approve of this?" He paused. "I think she'd want justice, and I think she'd trust you to find it." The lump in my throat grew unbearable. "Dad, what if something happens to me?" He turned to me, eyes full of a depth of love that made my breath catch. "Then I'll move heaven and earth to keep you safe. You're not alone in this." I rested my head against his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around me, and for a moment I was a child again, safe in the world because he was there. "I'm scared," I whispered. "So am I," he admitted. "But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what must be done in spite of it." I nodded against his shoulder. When we returned inside, Olivia had packed up her equipment and was preparing to leave. "I'll run deeper analysis tonight," she said. "You'll have everything you need by morning. And, Amelia," she paused, "you're stronger than you realize." I managed a small smile. "I hope so." After she left, Dad walked me to my room. I changed into pajamas, washed the last of my smeared makeup from my face, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the small mirror. I didn't look like the woman who had stood in a ballroom full of laughter and shame. I didn't look like the woman who had just learned her mother was murdered. I didn't look like the woman who was preparing to return to the place where everything had fallen apart. I looked like someone new, someone forged in a single night. A knock at the door gently pulled me from my thoughts. Dad peeked in. I just wanted to say, "I'm proud of you." My voice wavered. "I'm proud of you too, Dad." He smiled softly, then closed the door, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I lay down, pulling the quilt up to my chin. The locket rested warm against my collarbone, its presence steady grounding. Tomorrow I would walk back into the den of the people who destroyed my mother's life. But this time I wouldn't walk in blind. Tomorrow I would step into the Blackwell mansion, not as a bride-to-be, not as a woman begging for acceptance, but as Catherine Ford's daughter. And I was ready. I arrived at the Blackwell estate just after 10 the next morning, the sky overcast heavy with the kind of gray light that made everything feel suspended in time. The iron gates opened slowly, groaning like they resented letting me in again. I drove through, my heart pounding so fiercely I could feel the vibrations in the steering wheel. The mansion rose ahead, grand, cold, intimidating, its marble facade gleaming despite the dull morning air. The same place where I once imagined a future. The same place where my mother's killers lived in luxury. The same place where I had stood days ago in a gown of ivory satin thinking I belonged. Now it felt like a labyrinth built on lies. I parked in the circular driveway. For a moment I sat still, gripping the steering wheel, letting the gravity of what I was about to do settle into my bones. Olivia had told me to breathe, to keep my posture relaxed, to speak slowly and reveal nothing. Dad had hugged me before I left, whispering, "Remember who you are." But none of that mattered now. The only thing that mattered was keeping my voice steady when I walked inside. When I finally stepped out of the car, the front door opened immediately. Gavin stood in the doorway, his expression a mix of shock, guilt, and something else. Relief. "Amelia," he said, stepping forward as though I might vanish if he didn't reach me quickly. I wasn't expecting. Are you okay? Why didn't you call? I've been worried sick. Worried sick. Funny how those words meant something different now. I mustered a soft, controlled smile. "Hi, Gavin. I just wanted to talk, to get some closure." He swallowed hard. "Of course. Come in. Please." The foyer was just as I remembered, too white, too polished, too immaculate. A museum, pretending to be a home. I walked inside, forcing myself not to look at the chandelier where I once imagined our first dance. Gavin hovered close, but didn't touch me, as though he wasn't sure he was allowed to anymore. "Let's go to the sitting room," he suggested. "My parents are in town, but they'll be back soon. Vanessa's upstairs. It's just us for now." Perfect, I thought. Exactly what I needed. We entered the sitting room, gold accents, velvet chairs, a view of the expansive lawn. This room had always made me feel small, as though my worth depended on how quietly I could sit on expensive furniture. Gavin gestured to the sofa. "Sit, please." I did. He sat across from me, elbows on his knees, studying me with those gentle blue eyes I once trusted. "I didn't think you'd ever want to see me again," he said quietly. I clasped my hands to steady them. I needed time to process. Everything happened so fast. He nodded, staring at the floor. "I know, and I'm sorry. God, Amelia, I never wanted any of that to happen. I never wanted you to feel embarrassed or overwhelmed. Embarrassed. Overwhelmed. Interesting words for what had been deliberate cruelty orchestrated by his family. I forced my face to stay soft. I didn't come here for apologies. His eyes shot up. Then why closure? I repeated, to end things gracefully. To try to understand. He exhaled in relief. Good. I want that too. I want us to part without bitterness. Bitterness. Another interesting word. He leaned back slightly. Amelia, that night my father, my mother, Vanessa, they were under a lot of pressure. They weren't thinking clearly. I held his gaze steadily. They mocked my father. He winced, running a hand through his hair. They shouldn't have done that. I know. And I should have stepped in. I froze. I was trying to keep everything from falling apart. It fell apart anyway, I whispered. He nodded painfully. I know. And I regret it. I regret all of it. Silence stretched between us. His voice softened. I still care about you. I didn't answer that directly. Instead, I let the moment settle, then shifted the conversation gently toward what I had come for information. Gavin, I began lowering my voice. I know your family has been going through a lot lately. The business, the investors pulling out. I'm sure the wedding incident didn't help. He sighed heavily, rubbing the bridge of his nose. You have no idea. My father is losing his mind. The board is restless, the finances are strained, and we had to cancel 2 major partnerships this week alone. He blames me for everything. My breath caught. Blames you, why? Because I couldn't keep you, he said, voice cracking. Because the wedding falling apart made us look unstable, vulnerable. Investors hate vulnerability. I swallowed slowly. Vulnerable was a good word. Vulnerable people made mistakes. Your father's business, I said lightly, wasn't it doing really well? His expression darkened. It was. Until recently. Something's been happening behind the scenes. Something big. My father hasn't slept in days. He keeps taking these private calls and disappearing into his study for hours. I don't even know what's going on anymore. A pulse of adrenaline raced through me. Something big. Private calls. Business strain. Investors pulling out. It was already happening, the early ripples of the truth my mother left behind. I kept my tone gentle. Have you asked him what's wrong? Gavin let out a short, bitter laugh. He doesn't tell me anything. Never has. I'm just the face he puts on brochures and charity boards. He keeps the real business buried somewhere I'm not allowed to see. I leaned forward slightly. Do you want to see? He blinked at me, startled by the question. I continued softly. You're his son. Don't you deserve to know what's going on, especially if it affects you? His gaze softened, vulnerable in a way I had never seen. Of course I want to know. But he'll never let me in. You saw that yourself. Yes, I whispered. I did. A long silence followed. A silence that opened a door. He looked at me again, confusion flickering in his eyes. Why does it matter to you? Why ask these questions? I offered a tired, wistful smile, because I'm trying to understand who you really are, and what you're up against. I spent so long thinking I knew this family. Maybe I didn't. It wasn't a lie, not technically. He looked deeply moved. Amelia, I wish things had been different. Before I could respond, footsteps echoed from the hallway. I stiffened instinctively. Elaine Blackwell entered the room, her expression tight as drawn wire. Her eyes landed on me with a practiced smile that didn't touch her eyes. Amelia, she said smoothly. I didn't expect to see you. I rose politely. Hello, Mrs. Blackwell. I just came to speak with Gavin. Her gaze skimmed over me like I was an item she was appraising. I see. Well, this is a surprise. Behind her came Marcus Blackwell, adjusting his cufflinks expression sharp and unreadable. His eyes zeroed in on me with something like irritation, or perhaps suspicion. "Miss Ford," he said with a cool nod. "Did we forget something at the venue?" "No," I replied calmly. "I just wanted closure." Marcus's jaw flexed. "Closure. Right." Elaine stepped beside him, touching his elbow lightly. "We're all trying to move forward, aren't we?" Gavin stood quickly. "She just came to talk, Mother." Elaine's smile tightened. "Of course." Marcus didn't smile at all. His gaze felt like a weight on the back of my neck. "We should talk privately," he said to Gavin, but his eyes stayed on me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I felt danger coil somewhere unseen. Gavin turned to me. "Amelia, could you wait here for a moment? I'll be right back." "Of course," I said softly. The three of them left the room. The moment they were gone, I exhaled shakily. I didn't have much time. The longer I stayed, the more likely they'd start asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. I looked around the room carefully. The Blackwells were wealthy, but they were also careless in their arrogance. Their study doors usually remained locked, but I remembered something. Something small. Something from weeks before the wedding. One evening, Gavin had shown me where they kept old photo albums tucked away in a side cabinet near the hall. That cabinet also sat beside a small control panel, one I had barely noticed at the time. The home's internal network hub. My heart raced. Olivia had given me a small encrypted scanner, something simple, innocuous, disguised as a pen. If I could plug it into the control panel's port, it could map the device names on the household network. If Marcus kept any files or calls synced to in-house servers, we could track them. I stood slowly listening for footsteps. None. I moved down the hallway, the click of my heels muffled by the thick carpet. I reached the cabinet, crouched down, and slipped the panel open. There it was, a small network port. I slid Olivia's device into the slot and watched it blink faintly. Seconds passed. Footsteps approached from deeper in the house. My pulse spiked. The tiny light flashed green. Downloaded. I pulled the device free and slipped it into my pocket just as a figure appeared at the end of the hall. Vanessa. Her arms were crossed, her eyes narrowed. "Well, well," she said, smirking. "Look who crawled back." I straightened, forcing a slow breath. "Hello, Vanessa." She tilted her head, sizing me up. "You think you can just waltz in here after humiliating my family?" I think I said calmly, "That what happened humiliated me too." She scoffed. "Please. You're the one who caused the scene." I didn't respond. There was no point. Vanessa thrived on reaction. "Well," she continued, her voice dripping condescension, "don't get too comfortable. My mother doesn't want you here, and my father thinks you came to make trouble." I lifted an eyebrow. "Then why did Gavin let me in?" Her jaw tightened. "Exactly." Before she could respond, Marcus's voice boomed from down the hall. "Amelia." I turned. He approached with a stiff smile. "We've had our discussion. Gavin will walk you out." The dismissal was clear, but something in his eyes, a flicker of unease, a tension he couldn't hide, told me he suspected nothing yet. They all believed I had come for closure, for pity, for scraps of emotional mercy. Instead, I was leaving with something far more valuable. Gavin emerged behind him, looking conflicted. "Can I walk you to your car?" I nodded. We stepped outside. The air smelled of damp stone and clipped hedges. Before I could speak, Gavin touched my arm lightly. "Amelia," he whispered, "I don't know what's going to happen next, but please be careful." His concern was real, but his loyalty would never belong to me. I pulled my arm gently away. "Goodbye, Gavin." He looked devastated, but he didn't follow me. I walked to my car with steady steps, slid inside, closed the door, and only then let out the breath I'd been holding. In my pocket, Olivia's scanner pressed against my thigh. Evidence. Access. Entry points. Weaknesses. Everything we needed to go further. I started the engine. For the first time since the wedding fell apart, a fierce, unshakable certainty filled me. This wasn't the end. It was the first strike. The Blackwells had no idea what was coming, and neither did I. Not yet. Dad was pacing the living room when I returned home, his hands clenched behind his back, his shoulders tight with worry. The moment he heard the front door open, he rushed toward me, eyes scanning for any sign I'd been hurt or followed. "You're early," he said sharply, though relief softened the edges of his tone. Did something happen? Did they— "I'm fine," I said gently, closing the door behind me. I did what I needed to do. Olivia stepped in from the hallway, arms crossed, waiting. Well, I reached into my coat pocket and placed the small encrypted scanner on the table between us. "I got it," I said. Dad let out a shaky breath and sank onto the sofa as though the air had been knocked out of him. Olivia's eyebrows lifted with impressed approval. "I knew you could," she said quietly. I sat beside Dad. Marcus and Elaine didn't suspect anything. Vanessa was— Vanessa. Gavin looked lost. "But I got what we needed," good, Olivia said. "Then we keep moving before the window closes." She took the device reverently as though it were a priceless artifact and carried it to the dining table where her laptop waited. Dad and I followed the atmosphere, shifting from relief to concentrated urgency. Olivia plugged the scanner into her machine. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, the system decrypting the captured network data. She leaned forward, fingers flying over the keys. Come on," she murmured. Dad hovered at her shoulder like a storm cloud, quiet but filled with pressure. Within minutes, a diagram populated the screen. A full map of the Blackwell internal network. Dad inhaled sharply. There are dozens of devices. More than dozens, Olivia corrected. Servers, encrypted hard drives, cloud sync points, and this. She highlighted a blinking red node at the bottom of the diagram. I leaned closer. "What is that?" That, she said slowly, is a hidden directory, masked under the guise of a charity event archive. But it has irregular activity. Someone hid something there, something they access privately. Dad frowned. "Marcus," likely, Olivia said. "But look at this." Her finger traced another glowing node. "A secondary sync. Someone else also has access." I lifted my eyes to her. "Who?" She clicked again, and a second name appeared next to the private directory. Elaine Blackwell. Dad swore under his breath. So Elaine wasn't just playing socialite. She was safeguarding something so important she needed private access separate from her husband. Olivia continued scanning. "There's more. Look, these are outgoing encrypted calls routed through the home network. They go to offshore numbers tied to 2 known shell companies under the Blackwell portfolio." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," Olivia said slowly, "they are cleaning up something. Fast, moving assets, hiding funds. They suspect someone is coming for them." My stomach tightened. "Because of the wedding?" "Exactly," she said. "Your public exit made noise. Investors are nervous. Rumors are circulating. Marcus is scrambling to contain what he knows he can't fully control." She looked up at me, expression grave. "And they'll be ruthless now. Desperate people always are." Dad rubbed a hand across his jaw. "So we stay ahead." Olivia nodded. "And we strike before they can bury everything." She clicked another tab. "I'm pulling timestamps from the internal camera logs." Dad froze. "Cameras." "Yes," Olivia said. "The Blackwell mansion is riddled with them, even in private areas." A cold shiver ran through me. "Did they record what I did?" "No," she said. "That hallway panel wasn't in a monitored corridor." "Smart choice." Dad closed his eyes in relief for a brief, fleeting moment. So, what do we do next? Olivia turned to me. We widened the circle. My pulse skipped. Meaning, she said, it's not enough to gather data. We need allies. People in corporate law, compliance, finance, trustworthy experts who can verify structure and eventually present this evidence so the Blackwells can't dismiss it as fabricated. Dad frowned. But who can we trust? Olivia clicked open an encrypted folder. I've been preparing for this since the day Catherine died. I have contacts. Her old colleagues, former auditors, people Marcus fired when they got too close. My breath caught. You've been building this, waiting for this. She nodded once. Your mother was more than a friend. She was the bravest person I ever knew. When she died, when the official reports didn't add up, I promised myself that if her truth ever resurfaced, I would help finish what she started. Dad's voice cracked. Thank you. Olivia shook her head. Thank Catherine. She typed a message to one of her contacts, then another, then encrypted all outgoing correspondence. By tomorrow morning, she said, we'll have a small team assembled. People who know how to dismantle corruption from the inside. Quietly. Dad and I exchanged a look, fear-laced with hope. What about me? I asked. Olivia studied me. We need you to keep doing exactly what you're doing, acting normal, staying calm, staying in contact with Gavin. I stiffened. Why him? Because he's the weak link, she said bluntly. He's lost, conflicted. He suspects his father is hiding something. He will eventually start asking questions. When he does, he'll come to you. Dad bristled. I don't want her anywhere near him. But Olivia raised a hand. Henry, Gavin is not his father. He's a pawn, and pawns topple kings. She turned back to me. If he trusts you, he may reveal something unintentionally, where Marcus is the most stressed, what meetings he's hiding, who's contacting him. Gavin has access to the emotional cracks. That's critical. I didn't respond right away. I didn't like using Gavin even if he had failed me. But this wasn't about him. This was about Mom. About justice. I can do it, I said quietly. Dad sighed but didn't argue. A phone buzzed. Dad's. He glanced at the screen and his face turned ashen. I stepped closer. Dad. He handed the phone to me with shaking fingers. It was a voicemail. From an unknown number, but the transcription displayed a single sentence. Tell your daughter to stop digging. My blood ran cold. Dad whispered, They know. Olivia grabbed the phone, analyzing the metadata. No caller ID, scrambled signal. Low-level intimidation tactic. She looked up sharply. This means you were right. They suspect something. Not necessarily about the evidence, but about your return. My hands trembled. They think I'm a threat. Olivia's voice hardened. You are. Dad ran a hand through his hair, pacing. We need to be careful. We need another vibration. This time, it was my phone. A text from Gavin. Can we talk? It's important. Olivia looked over my shoulder. Here it comes. Dad frowned. What does he want? I shook my head slowly. I don't know. Olivia stepped back, thinking. This is the moment. If Gavin is reaching out on his own, something inside that house is unraveling faster than Marcus can control. Dad snapped. He might be being used. Yes, Olivia said, but that's why we proceed intelligently. Amelia will not go alone. I looked between them. How do we handle this? Olivia took a slow breath. Respond with something neutral, open-ended, something that doesn't show fear or suspicion. I typed, Of course. What's going on? His reply came instantly. It's not safe to text. Can you meet me somewhere? My pulse hammered. Dad grabbed the phone. Absolutely not. We hear him out, Olivia said. Dad stared at her, incredulous. He could be bait. He could, she said calmly, or he could be the one person closest to Marcus's weak points. Information is power, and right now Amelia has more leverage than she realizes. I swallowed. Where does he want to meet? Another message arrived. Down by the marina. In 20 minutes. Please. Dad shook his head violently. We are not letting her go. Olivia stepped closer, her voice low and firm. Henry let me go with her. I'll stay out of sight. If anything feels wrong, I pull her out. Dad looked torn between fear and fury. Or, Olivia added gently, we send a message back that Amelia is frightened, panicking, hiding. Do you want Marcus to know she's scared? Dad closed his eyes. Then finally nodded. I typed, okay, I'm coming. Dad placed both hands on my shoulders. If anything feels wrong, anything you walk away, promise me. I promise, I whispered. Olivia grabbed her coat. Let's move. We left in 2 separate cars, mine in front, Olivia's shadowing closely behind. The marina wasn't far, but each minute felt stretched thin with dread. The world outside blurred trees, lampposts, storefronts, until we turned into the quiet, mist-wrapped harbor. Gavin stood by the railing, hands shoved into his coat pockets, pacing aggressively. He looked different, disheveled, anxious, haunted. When he saw my car, he stopped pacing and lifted his head. I stepped out slowly, scanning the area with subtle glances the way Olivia had trained me. No unfamiliar cars, no figures lurking in shadows, just the sound of gulls and the soft slap of water against boats. Gavin rushed toward me. Amelia? Thank God. What's wrong? I asked calmly, keeping distance between us. He swallowed hard. Something's happening. Something bad. My father, he's terrified. I've never seen him like this. He's burning documents, locking himself in his office, yelling at lawyers. My mother is losing it. Vanessa won't stop crying. I don't know what's going on, but I know it started after the wedding. I steadied my breath. Why tell me this? Because his voice broke. Because I think they did something. Something unforgivable. And I think they're afraid it's coming back. He stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. Amelia, do you know anything about this? About why they're panicking? I held his gaze, letting fear, grief, and honesty swirl behind my eyes. I know. I whispered slowly that the truth always surfaces eventually. He stared at me, and then whispered, My father was involved in your mother's accident, wasn't he? The world froze. The water stilled. My breath caught midair. And somewhere behind me, unseen, I knew Olivia had tightened her grip on her concealed weapon. I felt the shift inside me, an ancient, burning clarity. Yes, I whispered. Gavin staggered as though I had struck him. No, he breathed. No, that can't be true. It is. He ran a trembling hand through his hair. My God, what have they done? I kept my voice gentle but firm. Gavin, if you know anything at all, you need to tell me. He looked at me, torn apart from the inside. And then he whispered the words that would change everything. There's a hidden account and a hidden room in the mansion where my father keeps what he calls insurance. I think... His voice cracked. I think it's connected to your mother. The world tilted. My pulse roared in my ears. Dad had said we needed to get inside the empire. Now Gavin had given us the doors. Very quietly, Gavin added, I'll help you. I breathed in slowly. The war had found its opening, and the Blackwells had no idea their downfall had already begun. Gavin stared at me like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the next step might save him, or destroy everything he'd ever known. His confession hung in the cold marina air, sharp as a blade. A hidden room, a secret account, insurance. My mother's death. I felt the wind lift strands of my hair as if the world itself had paused to listen. "Gavin," I said softly, "you need to tell me everything." He swallowed hard. I don't know everything. But I know enough to be scared. Enough to know my father is hiding things. Enough to know my mother is terrified. And enough to know Vanessa has been snooping around and got threatened for it. My pulse spiked. Threatened by who? Gavin hesitated. By my father. I heard them fighting 2 nights ago. He told her to stay out of what doesn't concern her, or she'd regret it. Olivia's shadow shifted behind the boat shed where she was hidden, listening to every word. "And the hidden room?" I asked, steadying my breath. Gavin exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair. "It's in his study, behind a wall panel. I never knew about it until I accidentally saw him come out of it last year." He was pale, like he'd seen a ghost. My heart clenched. "What does he keep in there?" I whispered. He shook his head. "Files, binders, hard drives, and a safe. A big one. He called it his insurance collection. He said it keeps the world in check." A tremor went through me. Insurance. My mother had used the same word. Gavin stepped closer. "Amelia, I think whatever's in that room might explain everything. About the business, about my father, maybe even about your mother." I held his gaze, seeing the truth in his eyes. Fear, guilt, desperation, and something else. A plea. "I don't want to be like him," he whispered. "Help me do the right thing." My throat tightened. "Then you need to help us get inside that room." Gavin flinched. "Inside, Amelia, it's locked. Controlled. My father keeps the only access card on him. And even if we get inside, the wrong move could set off alarms." Olivia stepped silently out of the shadows, then calm composed her presence, slicing through the tension like a surgeon's blade. Gavin jumped, startled. "It's okay," I said quickly. "She's with me." Olivia extended a hand. "Olivia Reyes." "Gavin." He shook her hand nervously. You're a private investigator, a professional problem solver," she replied. "One who specializes in the kind of problems your family creates." He paled. Olivia turned to me. "We can breach the room, but not recklessly. We need to map the interior first. See the alarm system, understand the lock." Gavin nodded slowly. "I can get you close. I know when my father leaves, and when the staff rotates. But we'd only have a small window, minutes maybe." Dad stepped out from behind Olivia's car suddenly. He'd followed us in secret after all, unable to let me walk into danger alone. His face was tight with worry. "I'm not putting my daughter into that house again," he said, voice shaking with emotion. I placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Dad, I'll be careful." "No." He shook his head, his voice cracking. "They hurt your mother. They humiliated me. They threatened us. I'm not losing you too." Gavin's expression softened. "Mr. Ford, I swear I won't let anything happen to her." Dad glared. "You said the same thing about the wedding." That hit Gavin like a punch. He lowered his gaze, shame flooding his features. "I was blind then," he whispered. "I'm not blind anymore." Silence fell over the group, thick, heavy, fragile. Finally, Olivia broke it. "We don't need Amelia in the house for the first phase. Gavin can begin by mapping the hallway, taking quiet notes, gathering codes. Amelia will stay out of sight." Dad exhaled shakily. Good. Yes." But Olivia wasn't finished. "However, she continued for the second phase when we actually access the room. Amelia is the only one Marcus won't immediately suspect." Dad stiffened. "Absolutely not. But I already knew. It has to be me," I said softly. "I'm the only one who can get close without raising alarms." Dad turned to me, anguish in his eyes. "Sweetheart." I squeezed his hand. "Mom didn't get the chance to finish this." "I do." He closed his eyes, breathing through the pain. Then he nodded. Gavin cleared his throat. I can get you in tomorrow. My father is meeting investors at the downtown club in the afternoon. He always leaves for at least 2 hours. That's your window. Olivia pulled out her notebook. We'll need a layout of the study, the security pattern, where the panel is, where the safe is. Gavin nodded. I can draw it. He knelt beside the bench and sketched quickly, his hands shaking. Olivia watched with hawk-like attention. Dad paced behind us, muttering prayers under his breath. Once the sketch was finished, Olivia leaned over it. Good, she said. The panel is old, I can bypass it. But the safe? It's biometric, Gavin said. Palm print. Olivia cursed softly. Then we'll need something of Marcus's. An imprint. Or at least a workaround. Dad rubbed his face. This is insane. Yes, Olivia said calmly, but necessary. There was no turning back now. After Gavin left the marina, Olivia and Dad drove behind me the entire way home, hovering like shields. Inside the house, we regrouped at the dining table again. Olivia opened the stolen network map. We need to pinpoint which files Marcus has hidden. The USB from your mother was a treasure trove, but I suspect Marcus keeps the rest, the files he stole from her, maybe even the risk logs she created before she died. Dad paled. You think he kept them? Marcus keeps evidence, Olivia said. Not to expose others, but to protect himself. Leverage, control, insurance. That word again. Dad's voice dropped. And you think he kept something of Catherine's? Yes, she said. Sometimes guilt makes people sloppy. Sometimes they keep trophies. Strings to pull if ever questioned. A chill ran the length of my spine. I whispered, he kept her files to protect himself. Olivia nodded, and to bury them if needed. Dad looked sick. The rest of the night was strategy mapping entries, exits, timing, camera blind spots, contingency plans. Olivia coached me on every detail, every angle, every possible failure point. If Marcus comes back early, run, she said. If Vanessa sees you, deflect. If Elaine questions you, cry, Dad muttered bitterly. If Gavin gets scared, calm him, Olivia added. When the clock hit midnight, she closed her notebook. Tomorrow, she said quietly, you will walk into that mansion as someone they still underestimate. Do not forget that is your greatest advantage. I nodded slowly. Once she and Dad returned to the living room, I slipped outside onto the porch, needing air. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, still and silver. I held the locket in my hand. Mom, I whispered, I'm going in tomorrow. Into the place that took you away from me. The breeze brushed against my cheek, gentle as a hand. I'm scared, I admitted. But I'm ready. Behind me, the porch boards creaked softly. Dad stepped beside me. We stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of the mission pressing down like a second sky. Finally, he spoke. Your mother used to come out here at night too, he murmured. She'd stand right where you're standing now. She'd stare at the water and whisper her plans into the wind. She said the lake listened, that it held everything she was afraid to say out loud. I closed my eyes, imagining her. Dad continued, voice thickening. I couldn't protect her. But I will protect you. I turned to him, tears rising. Dad, you already have. My whole life. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me as though the world might collapse if he let go. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said softly into my hair. We face it together. You hear me. Together. I nodded against his chest, breathing in the comfort and fear and fierce, unbreakable love that had shaped my entire life. Tomorrow I would walk back into the Blackwell mansion. Tomorrow I would come face to face with the men who destroyed my mother. Tomorrow I would step into the hidden room where the truth lived in the dark. And tomorrow I would not break. I would expose them. I would honor my mother. And I would finish what she started. The Blackwell mansion looked different in daylight, colder, sharper, as if the sun only highlighted the parts of it that were rotting underneath the surface. I waited in my car across the street, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. My heart thudded in a slow, heavy rhythm that made the air feel thick. At exactly 2:15, Marcus's black sedan pulled out of the driveway. He didn't drive himself. His driver opened the back door and Marcus climbed in, phone already pressed to his ear, barking orders before the door even shut. The car rolled away, disappearing around the corner toward the private downtown club Gavin had mentioned. The moment the taillights vanished, Olivia's voice crackled through the earpiece she had discreetly given me. "He's gone. Window starts now." I exhaled slowly. "Copy." Dad's voice followed, tremulous but steady. "Be careful, sweetheart. Please." "I will," I said. "I promise." I stepped out of the car wearing a neutral outfit, cream sweater, dark jeans, flat shoes. Nothing that stood out, nothing memorable. Just a daughter dropping by her ex-fiancé's house to pick up her things. The story Gavin had fed the staff. My palms were sweating. When I reached the front door, it opened before I could knock. Gavin. His face was pale, eyes red and unfocused. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't eating. His hands shook when he motioned for me to enter. "Come in," he whispered. "They're all out except Mrs. Davenport and one of the maids. I told them you'd be coming." The entryway felt cavernous, its marble floors echoing every step I took. I remembered walking through this same hall months ago, dreaming of a wedding here, imagining warm welcomes and future family dinners. Now it felt like entering a predator's mouth. Gavin closed the door behind us, leaning against it. "You're sure you want to do this?" he asked. "Yes," I said without hesitation. He studied me for a moment, then nodded shakily. "Follow me." He led me through the familiar hallways, past the grand staircase, past Marcus's office, past the room where Vanessa used to play piano. Everything felt haunted now. Memories pressed against my ribcage as we walked deeper into the house. When we reached the west corridor, Gavin hesitated. "It's down here," he whispered. "My dad's study." He glanced around, checking for cameras. Olivia had already mapped out the blind spots. I walked exactly where she instructed, beneath the chandelier's shadow beside the console table, staying out of range. Gavin opened the study door. The room was large but suffocating thick with the smell of cigar smoke and expensive leather. The desk was polished to a mirror shine, papers neatly stacked, the window shades half drawn. But my eyes went straight to the wall behind the old portrait of Elias Blackwell. The hidden room. Gavin closed the door softly. "The panel is behind the portrait. It's pressure sensitive. You push here." He pressed a certain spot at the bottom of the frame and then slid the entire painting to the left. The portrait moved with a faint mechanical click, revealing a metal wall panel with a card reader and biometric scanner. My throat tightened. "Olivia," I whispered into the mic, "panel is visible." Her calm voice came through. "Good. Patch me in with Gavin. I need him to describe the reader." Gavin leaned closer to my collar discreetly. "Hello, Gavin," Olivia said. "What model is the scanner?" He described the device, the wiring, the manufacturer. Olivia muttered under her breath. Rapid calculating, then spoke. Exactly what I hoped. "Amelia, the bypass tool. I gave you take it out." I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a small device that looked like a thumb drive fused with a metal clamp. "Attach it to the scanner's bottom plate," she ordered. "It'll override the palm recognition for 45 seconds. No more." My pulse climbed into my throat. "Okay." My hands trembled, but I did as she said. The device clicked into place. The scanner beeped once, then again. A soft electronic whir vibrated behind the wall. Gavin inhaled sharply. "It's unlocking." Olivia's voice hardened. "Move. Now." The metal panel slid open silently, revealing another door steel-thick, ominous. This one wasn't electronic. It was old-school, a manual lock, antique but solid. "That's what he uses when he doesn't trust technology," Gavin whispered. I turned the handle. It opened. Cold air flowed out like the room exhaled after years of holding its breath. Gavin stepped back, eyes wide. I've never been inside. Ever. I lifted my chin and entered. The hidden room was smaller than I expected. Narrow, dimly lit, lined entirely with shelves filled with black binders and labeled portfolios. Dozens of them. Maybe more. A desk sat in the center with neatly arranged hard drives, USBs, envelopes sealed with wax. And in the far corner, a massive safe. My pulse stuttered. Amelia Olivia murmured in my ear, "Describe what you're seeing." Files, records, hard drives, more than we thought. Gavin stood behind me, swallowing hard. He kept everything. Olivia exhaled slowly. "Start with the binders. Look for anything marked with the charity subsidiary. That's where your mother worked." I moved to the shelves, scanning labels. Property transfers, expense reports, offshore accounts, employee compliance, charity, oversight, division. My heart lurched. I pulled out the charity binder. Inside were spreadsheets, financial logs, internal memos. Olivia guided me on what to photograph: every suspicious transfer, every project Mom had flagged before her death. Then I found it. A memo written by my mother, and handwritten notes beside it. Marcus's handwriting. "Kill project. Remove risk." She knows too much. My breath left my body. I choked on air, grabbing the shelf to steady myself. Gavin stepped closer. "What is it? What did you find?" I couldn't speak. I could barely think. Olivia's voice sharpened. "Amelia, talk to me. I found my mother's memo, and notes about shutting her down. Notes from Marcus." Dad whispered through the mic, voice breaking. Oh God. I fought tears. This wasn't the moment to fall apart. I photographed everything mechanically, hands trembling. Then Olivia said, "Amelia, the safe. We need to try the safe." Gavin moved beside it, inspecting the keypad. It's a 6-digit code. He changes it every few months, but always keeps it personal. "Try birthdays," Olivia urged. He tried his father's, invalid, his mother's, invalid, Vanessa's, invalid. I stared at the keypad, mind racing. "Try the anniversary date," I whispered. He punched it in. The safe clicked. My heart stopped. "You did it," Olivia breathed. Gavin opened the heavy door. Inside were stacks of cash passports, more drives, and an envelope labeled in bold marker C. Ford. Incident report. Private. Do not file, destroy after reading. My knees weakened. "Amelia." Olivia said urgently, "Take it. Everything inside that envelope, take photos and take the physical copy." I did. Inside were documents describing the night my mother died. She had left the office late after fighting with Marcus over the charity audit. She got into her car. She drove off. A Blackwell security vehicle followed her. The report suggested a traffic distraction tactic was used, a staged near collision, enough to force her to swerve. The car rolled. It was labeled an accident, but the report said otherwise. Vehicle impact intended to intimidate. Unintended fatal result. I covered my mouth to keep from screaming. Gavin staggered back, horrified. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" Dad's voice cracked in my ear. "They killed her. They killed my Catherine." Footsteps echoed outside the hall. Gavin's head shot up. "Oh no." "Who is it?" I whispered. But I already knew. "Elaine." Her voice drifted through the hall. "Amelia Gavin. Why is the study door open?" Panic surged through my veins. Olivia's voice was sharp razor steel. "Close the safe. Hide the envelope. Get out. Now." Gavin scrambled, shutting the safe just as the doorknob rattled. Gavin Elaine called again, suspicious now. "What are you doing in there?" he whispered frantically. "The back door. The service hallway connects to the conservatory." I stuffed the envelope inside my sweater, zipped it up, and ran. We slipped out through the secondary door at the back of the study just as Elaine swung the main door open. Gavin pulled me into the narrow service corridor, our breaths ragged. Olivia whispered, "Left, down the stairs, out through the side garden." We moved like ghosts. At the bottom of the stairs, Gavin caught my arm. "Promise me," he whispered urgently, "you won't face him alone." My throat tightened. "I won't." He let go. I disappeared out the side entrance, down the path, and out the gate into the street. Only when I reached my car did I let the sob burst free. Dad and Olivia pulled up seconds later. Dad ran to me, gathering me into his arms, his chest shaking. "What happened? Are you hurt? Amelia?" I shook my head violently. "Dad, they killed her. They killed Mom." He froze. His breath hitched, then his face crumpled. Olivia stepped forward slowly. "We have proof now. Hard proof." I clutched the envelope to my chest. He murdered her, Olivia. It was planned. They covered it up. He killed her. Olivia's eyes hardened, cold and lethal. "Then this is no longer just exposure," she said. "This is takedown." Dad lifted his head, voice trembling with fury. "We end him." The air around us felt electric, charged, unbreakable. For years, Marcus had held the world in his fist, but now we held the reason it would all collapse. Tomorrow the war would begin. And this time, I wasn't the one who should be afraid. Dad sat hunched over the dining table long after the sun had risen, the envelope spread open between his trembling hands. I had never seen him look so hollow, so stripped of breath. His eyes tracked each line of the report again and again, as if rereading it might somehow soften the truth it carried. "They chased her," he whispered hoarsely. "They chased her off the road." I sat beside him close enough to feel the tremor in his body. My chest felt tight with a grief so sharp I thought it might cleave me in two. "They didn't mean to kill her," I said quietly, repeating the words from the report. "But they meant to silence her." Dad shook his head slowly. "Intent doesn't matter. They destroyed her life. They destroyed ours." And Marcus walked away clean. Not anymore, I thought. Olivia paced the kitchen, her jaw locked, her mind racing. She had been awake all night, analyzing the contents of the envelope, cross-checking files, digging deeper into the Blackwell network. Her laptop was open on the counter screens, filled with financial webs and offshore accounts. "We have enough to expose him publicly," she said finally. "But public exposure alone won't break him completely. He has backup networks, contingency funds, people on his payroll who will fight to keep him afloat." I rubbed my temples. "So what do we do?" "We hit him from every side," she replied. "Financially, legally, socially, and internally." Dad looked up. "Internally," Olivia nodded. "Marcus's power isn't just in his wealth. It's in the loyalty or fear of the people who surround him. If we crack that foundation, the rest will fall." I exhaled slowly. "We start with the charity division." "Yes," she said. "Your mother's division. The same place where she uncovered the fraud. The same place Marcus buried everything." Dad's voice hardened. "It's poetic." Olivia continued. "The charity funds were funneled into offshore accounts Marcus controlled. Thousands of employees, donors, and beneficiaries were unknowingly defrauded. If this information goes public, the fallout will be massive. Lawsuits, criminal charges, investors fleeing. The board will have no choice but to remove him." Dad squeezed my hand. "And that's only the beginning." A phone buzzed on the table. Gavin. My pulse stumbled. He had been terrified after what happened yesterday. We hadn't heard from him since. The message preview read, We need to meet. My father knows someone was in the study. He's furious. I swallowed hard and opened the full text. He suspects you. You need to be careful. Dad snatched the phone from my hand. You're not meeting him. But Olivia raised a hand. We need information. Gavin is our only connection inside that house. Dad glared. He's also Marcus's son. And he hates what his father is becoming, she countered. He showed us the way into the hidden room. Without him, we'd still be in the dark. Dad muttered under his breath, torn between fear and resentment. I typed back, where Gavin replied instantly. The old conservatory, half an hour. Please. I stood up. I'll go. Dad's chair scraped violently across the floor. No, Amelia, listen to me. But Olivia stepped between us. Henry, if Marcus knows someone entered the study, he'll try to patch every hole, destroy files, hide assets, transfer accounts. Before we can act. Dad's jaw clenched. He looked at me, then at the envelope, then at the floor. You go, he said finally. But Olivia goes with you. I nodded. 20 minutes later, I stood at the edge of the old conservatory behind the Blackwell estate, heart pounding as I pushed open the rusted door. The glass walls were cracked, the air heavy with the smell of damp soil and forgotten orchids. Sunlight filtered through broken panes, scattering shards of gold across the floor. Gavin was already there. He looked worse than before, dark circles under his eyes, a split lip, a bruise forming on his cheekbone. My stomach twisted. What happened to you? He shook his head quickly. Nothing. Doesn't matter. His voice was thin, frayed. Listen. You need to know. My father, he's not himself. He's unraveling. He's in full lockdown mode. He fired half the staff this morning. He's calling emergency meetings. He's tearing apart his office. I stepped closer. Does he know it was us? Gavin looked away, jaw tightening. He doesn't know for sure, but he knows someone accessed the study. And because his world is small, because he can only imagine betrayal from those closest, he's starting with me. My breath hitched. Did he hurt you? Gavin gave a hollow laugh. He hurt my whole life. For a moment, he looked like a lost child. Then the pain in his expression hardened into anger. He confronted me last night, asked if I'd been sneaking around, asked if I'd let you in, asked if I was conspiring with you. His voice cracked. He said he should have sent me away to military school when he had the chance. I clenched my fists. Gavin, no. He raised a hand sharply. Don't apologize. This isn't your fault. This is who he is. Tears stung his eyes, but he blinked them back. He took a shaky breath. Amelia, whatever you found in that room, whatever you take public, you have to be ready. My father will burn the world down before he lets anyone destroy him. I know, I whispered. He stepped closer, voice lowering. There's more. He's preparing to move assets out of the country. He called with his finance team about opening channels in Luxembourg and the Cayman network. He's liquidating everything not nailed down. Olivia, hidden behind a line of overgrown ferns, whispered sharply in my earpiece. This is it. This is the pressure we needed. Gavin kept talking, unaware of her presence. And he's watching you, Amelia. He has someone following you. He thinks you still have influence over me. My blood chilled. Are you serious? Gavin nodded. I overheard him on the phone with a security consultant. He said your name. Twice. Olivia whispered, We'll deal with the tail. Stay calm. Gavin stepped back, running a hand through his hair. I don't know how much longer I can stay in that house, he said, voice breaking. I don't know how much more of him I can take. I touched his arm gently. Gavin, thank you. You've already risked everything. He looked up at me, then really looked at me, and for the first time I saw the depth of his guilt. I should have stood up for you at the wedding, he whispered. I should have defended your father. I should have stopped them. I shook my head. We can't change the past. No, he said. But we can destroy the people who tried to control our futures. Before I could answer, Olivia stepped from the shadows. Gavin startled, stumbling back. You were here?" "Yes." Olivia's voice was calm, precise. "I needed to ensure the meeting wasn't compromised." Gavin swallowed. "So, what now?" Olivia folded her arms. "Now we bring your father down." She reached into her coat and pulled out 2 flash drives, one red, one black. She placed the red one in Gavin's hand. "This contains evidence from the charity division. Not everything, but enough to cause an internal firestorm. You'll send it anonymously to the board. They'll panic. They'll freeze his accounts. They'll demand an independent investigation." Gavin stared at the drive like it was radioactive. "And the black one?" he asked. Olivia slipped it into her own pocket. "That one destroys him publicly." Gavin let out a breath that trembled. "I'll do it," he said. "Tonight." After he left, Olivia and I walked back toward the parking lot. Dad waited near the car, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, worry etched in deep lines across his face. "Well?" Dad asked. I nodded. "He's helping, more than ever." Dad exhaled shakily. Olivia's voice was colder. "Marcus is mobilizing, trying to hide everything. But now that we know his moves, we can counter them." She looked at me. "Tomorrow morning, when the board receives the red drive, chaos will erupt. And chaos is exactly what we need." Dad placed a hand on my shoulder. "And what about us? What do we do right now?" Olivia's gaze hardened. "We prepare for the public strike. The moment Marcus is destabilized internally, Amelia will step forward with the full evidence. Her mother's files, the hidden report, the audit logs, everything." Dad swallowed. "Are you ready for that, sweetheart?" Was I ready? I looked at the mountains beyond the Blackwell estate, the sky shifting from gold to dusk. "I've waited my whole life for this," I said softly. "I'm ready." Dad's eyes shone with pride and heartbreak. Olivia stepped closer. "Tomorrow, Amelia Ford becomes the name that destroys Marcus Blackwell." The weight of it settled over me like a mantle. But beneath it was something else. Strength. The next morning would ignite the storm. The evidence would go to the board. The board would turn. The legal teams would panic. The press would swarm. Marcus Blackwell's empire would begin to crack. And I, Amelia Ford, would be holding the hammer. The boardroom of Blackwell Holdings was a glass cage suspended above the city, sharp-edged and merciless, the perfect nest for the powerful to tear each other apart. By the time I arrived with Olivia and Dad, the storm had already begun. Men in tailored suits shouted across the long mahogany table. Women in crisp blazers scrolled frantically through tablets filled with damning documents. Phones buzzed like angry insects. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. The red flash drive had done its job. Gavin sat alone near the back of the room, eyes hollow, hands clasped together as if he were holding himself upright by sheer force of will. He lifted his gaze when he saw me enter, relief, fear, and something like hope flickering all at once. I walked past him and took my place near the front, directly across from the empty chairman's seat. Marcus had not yet arrived. A board member slammed a stack of papers onto the table. "These financial discrepancies date back over 5 years. Millions unaccounted for." Another thrust her tablet toward the group. He funneled charity funds into offshore accounts. "If this gets out, we all go down with him. We need immediate action. Freeze his assets. This is criminal." The room spiraled into chaos until the doors burst open. Marcus Blackwell strode in. Everything froze. His face was thunderous, carved with rage he could barely contain. Behind him came Elaine, pale and frantic, and Vanessa, trembling eyes red from crying. Vanessa's gaze flitted to Gavin, but she didn't move toward him. She couldn't. She looked too afraid. Marcus stopped at the head of the table and spoke through clenched teeth. "Who in this room wants to explain why I woke up to 23 calls from law enforcement agencies?" Silence. His eyes swept across the group, sharp, cold hunting. "Who accessed my files?" No one answered. Cowards, he spat. Then his gaze landed on me. Of course. A smile that wasn't a smile twisted his mouth. Amelia, you just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? I kept my voice calm. Funny. That's exactly what my mother must have thought. A ripple of gasps swept the room. Marcus's nostrils flared. You don't know anything about your mother. I know enough, I said. I know she found the fraud. I know she confronted you. And I know she died the same night she threatened to report it. Elaine made a choking sound. Vanessa covered her mouth. Gavin lowered his head, shame pouring from him like rain. Marcus slammed his fist against the table so hard the glasses rattled. You watch your mouth. Dad stepped forward, then his voice breaking but strong. No, you watch your hands. You used them to destroy my wife. You used your power to take her away from me. Marcus scoffed. Your wife wasn't careful. She put herself in harm's way. Olivia's voice sliced through the room. A staged traffic distraction isn't harm's way. It's attempted murder. The board exploded. Murder. Is this true? Marcus, answer her. Marcus paced like a caged animal. All of you need to calm down. These accusations are baseless. This entire fiasco has been orchestrated by a bitter ex who wants revenge. Then explain this. I stepped forward and placed the envelope. His envelope on the table. Gasps erupted the moment the board members recognized the label. C. Ford. Incident report. Private. Do not file destroy after reading. Marcus's face drained of all color. Where did you get that? He snarled. From your safe, I said simply. From your hidden room. Behind the portrait of your father. You really should invest in better locks. His jaw clenched, fury igniting in his eyes. I opened the envelope and spread the documents across the table. Impact analysis, internal memos, risk evaluations. The admission that the intimidation tactic resulted in the unintended fatal crash. These are your words, I said. Your notes. Your signature. Board members surged forward, crowding around the evidence. A woman near the center covered her mouth. This could put the entire company under investigation. Another shook his head in disbelief. Marcus, you lied to us. You lied to all of us. Marcus slammed both hands onto the table and shouted, This is taken out of context. It's taken from your own files, Olivia said coolly. Marcus wheeled on Gavin, then eyes bloodshot. You did this. Gavin stood slowly, trembling but resolute. No, father. You did this to yourself. The room erupted again. Board members shouting, phones dialing lawyers, someone yelling to call an emergency vote. Marcus lunged toward Gavin, but two board members stepped between them. Dad moved instinctively in front of me. And then loudly enough to silence the room, one of the senior board members spoke. I call for an immediate vote to remove Marcus Blackwell as CEO of Blackwell Holdings. The room fell dead silent. Marcus stared at them, stunned. You can't, he whispered. I am this company. No, the board member said, you are what's destroying it. The vote was swift, hands raised, one after another, all but two. Marcus stared in disbelief as the final hand lifted. You're out, the board member said. Effective immediately. Elaine let out a strangled sob. Vanessa collapsed back into her chair. Gavin closed his eyes, tears leaking out despite his efforts to hold them in. Marcus staggered backward, blinking as if the room had tilted beneath him. You're making a mistake, he hissed. A catastrophic mistake. You'll regret this. No, I said quietly. The only mistake was thinking no one would ever challenge you. Marcus's lip curled. You think you've won. You haven't seen what I can. Security. Two guards stepped forward. For a moment, Marcus looked like he might attack them, but his shoulders slumped. His arrogance drained. His reign shattered. He allowed them to escort him out, but not before turning back to me with eyes filled with venom. This isn't over. I met his glare, unwavering. For you, it is. The doors shut behind him. The board exhaled collectively. Gavin collapsed into a chair and buried his face in his hands. Dad squeezed my shoulders, tears streaking down his cheeks. Your mother would be so proud. And then something unexpected happened. A board member stood and said, Ms. Ford, we owe you more than an apology. You exposed something we were blind to. You saved this company from a monster. Another added, we need new leadership, someone with ethics, someone with a stake in repairing the damage. I blinked. What are you saying? The senior member stepped forward. We want you to take a seat on the interim leadership committee. I froze. Me. Dad laughed softly through his tears. She's more capable than anyone here. Olivia squeezed my arm. Say yes. Your mother earned this moment. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the past pressing on my shoulders, but also the light of dawn breaking through. I accept, I said. Applause echoed around the room. Applause in the place where they once mocked my father. Applause in the place where my mother's truth had been buried. Applause in the place where justice had finally come home. Hours later, standing outside the building with Dad and Olivia, the wind cold but clean, I felt a quiet peace settle in my chest. I could almost hear my mother's voice in the breeze. You finished it, Amelia. You finished what I started. Dad wrapped his arm around me as the sun dipped behind the city skyline. What now? He asked. I smiled softly. Now, I said, we rebuild everything we lost. He nodded, tears in his eyes. Together. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. If you've stayed with me until this moment, thank you for listening to my story. Tell me in the comments what would you have done in my place. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me for the next journey.